Our lunch speaker today is Cary Goodman. Cary Goodman is the National Program Director of the National Brain Health Center for African Americans, a program component of the Balm of Gilead in Richmond, Virginia. For the past 12 years, he's traveled extensively throughout the country, educating, advocating, and empowering faith communities on various public health issues such as HIV/AIDS, hepatitis C, food and nutrition, Alzheimer's and related dementias, diabetes, obesity, and other chronic conditions. Cary is diligently working to establish and expand health programs in every church in the United States. He currently serves on planning boards for various national conferences and organizations. Let's give him a welcome. Clap.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. So let me just preface this by saying I know I'm competing against food, so I will do my best to make sure that you get something while you're getting something, all right? As she stated, I am Cary Goodman, and I am the National Program Director for the Balm of Gilead and a part of the Balm of Gilead's National Brain Health Center for African Americans. And the National Brain Health Center for African Americans is an information hub that we have that we provide resources and education to various individuals that's interested in Alzheimer's, dementia, caregiving, and advocacy. I think it's very important that we have such a resource because we understand that there are far too few resources for African Americans that is specifically designed to African Americans. So please, if you get a chance, visit our website, which is www.balmingilead.org. And I'll spell that, that's BALMINGILEAD.org. And so I told Karen right before, while they were setting up for lunch, that I'm not going to do slides. George had a very good, thorough presentation on my slides. And so I appreciate him for that. So I'm just going to talk to you. And I understand and I appreciate everybody that put today together. Let's give them a hand. During the break, I was telling Kathy, this particular event is one that is very necessary because as a caregiver myself, it is what you need in order to be liberated, what you need in order to just have that moment where you can just breathe. When I sat down earlier on my Apple Watch, it periodically tells me to take a breath. And when I sat down, I hit my notification just because I needed that moment to just breathe. And I think as many of us that are caregivers, we don't do that enough. We don't, we're so worried about taking care of our loved ones that we don't get a moment to just breathe for ourselves. And so I appreciate you all for today. I believe that there's going to be so much breath happening in the room because I feel like there will be some persons who will be a little more freer when they leave here. So I want to just take this moment to personally thank Karen for the invitation. She did her diligent work to make sure that I was here, and I gave her my word that I would be here a long time ago, and so I am so glad that it actually manifested. So thank you so much, Karen, for your hard work today. And so I got a little bit of time. Is that all right? I got a little bit of time to enjoy you all. And as I typically start, and I did it yesterday, but just take a moment while you're eating. I just want you to have a reflective moment. Just think for a moment. Is that all right? And how I typically start my presentations is asking one simple question. And typically I have an instrument in my hand, and it's a mirror. And I ask the question, when you look in the mirror, who do you see? Let me say that again. When you look in the mirror, who do you see? And so I'm just going to take a moment and just walk around a little bit. I hope he doesn't get mad. I told him I was going to walk a little bit, so I hope the camera follows. So when you look in the mirror, who do you see?
I say this a lot because when older I get, I look in the mirror, I see my dad. I see Daddy. I see his eyes, everything.
Okay. Let me ask you, when you look in the mirror, who do you see?
Well, a couple months ago, I looked in the mirror and I said, I recognize that jawline that's changing, and it's my mom's. I said, that looks familiar, and it was my mom.
Okay. Okay. Let me go back here. I'm sorry. I want to ask a gentleman, when you look in the mirror, who do you see? Now, just take a moment and really think about this, because I'm going to go somewhere. So when you look in the mirror, who do you see?
I see myself, but like the others said, I do see other people in my family, some attributes that are definitely from my mother and my dad, and some from my grandmother as well. So.
All right, let me go to the other side of the room. I want somebody to tell me who they really see, because I think nobody's really being honest when they look in the mirror, who they really see.
Well, I did this recently, and I looked in the mirror and I said, I got to get this done. I see myself as somebody who's always got to get things done, get this done, get this done. So I don't take much time looking in the mirror. I try to avoid it so I can go get stuff done.
Okay. I saw another hand.
So when you first asked the question, I could see my mother because I don't have eyelashes on. But then I thought about it and I said, I see Beyonce. You know,
Okay.
full of life, you know, you want to do for others, you want to have a good time. Yes.
All right, we got Beyonce in the house. Anybody else? Anybody else that wants to share? Okay, I'm glad you did.
I see social constructs. So maybe this sounds negative, but sometimes when I look in the mirror, I see all the things that I'm not that I wish that I was. So all the things that the media tells me I'm supposed to look like, and all the negative things, and that can be hard sometimes.
I'm so glad you said that. Because in order to be very impactful in the work that we're doing, and in order to be a very successful caregiver, you have to first know who you really are. So if you look in the mirror and you see what other people are telling you what you need to be, then that's exactly what most of us do. Many times we look in the mirror and we see the mask that we put on a daily basis. Yes, I see the makeup, you all. I see the hair that you have on, yes. But when you take that off, when you stand in the mirror, fresh face, looking your natural self, like you have to be honest who you really are. Because, I walked around the room and I said, and it's great that you say, I see my mother, I see my father, I see various attributes of persons in my family, but that's great. But do you see hurt? Do you see pain? Do you see debt? Like, let's be honest. As a caregiver, we are never really honest about what it takes to get to the point that we really are. Like, nobody's gonna be really honest about what it took to get here today. So if you came from downtown Seattle, and you had to take an Uber to get here, that may have been like $25, $30. Let's be real. Many of us don't have $25, $30 every time we want to go one way. Ma'am, I know exactly what you went through to get here. But I'm coming back here too. Listen, let me help you. Let me help you. See, right. This right here is something that handicaps her for the rest of her life. And if there is not proper transportation for her to get to where she gotta go, then the reality is she may have to stay where she is. You want to say something? Come on, just take a moment.
Number one, when I look in the mirror, you know what I see? I see a miracle. I see a happy person, okay? And you don't know what I went through to get here. I waited over an hour for my ride to bring me. But I thank God, I'm still happy. You know, I look in the mirror, I see my mother, I see my father, and I see happiness. I'm not gonna let anybody steal my joy. You know, I slowed down, baby, but you're not gonna steal my joy. You know, I'm quiet now. You think I'm loud, but I'm usually quiet.
Y'all give her a hand. Because the reality is, so like I said, I'm a caregiver for my mother. My mother was diagnosed with diabetes when I was a youngster. And over the last 5 years, she's been in my care. Now, my mother, she's legally blind. She uses a walker. And so that means if she wants to go to the mall, that means we got to take a wheelchair. So I had to get a vehicle that was big enough to fit a wheelchair in it. Let me say that again. I had to purchase another vehicle in order for her mechanisms to get in. And many times, the funds are not there. Let's be real. How many of you like put $5 in your gas tank and say, I hope I make it where I gotta go? And if you get a full tank of gas, oh, you're doing really good. You know, a full tank of gas is like Christmas morning. Let's be real. Let's be real. And see, the reality is many of us are not being honest with ourselves when we look in the mirror. Many of us will believe what the media tells us that we should be. Many of us look in the mirror and believe what society say we should be. You know, but guess what? You make your standards and you live above the standards that you set for yourself, not what anybody else tells you to. So if you say you want to go to college and I don't have the money to go to college, guess what? You have the ability to do and be whatever you, hold up. All right, I wasn't gonna go here, but I'm gonna go here. All right. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm a preacher. All right. All right. So the Word of God declares in Proverbs, the 18th chapter and the 21st verse, it says this: death and life are in the power of the tongue. Let me say that again. Proverbs, the 18th chapter and the 21st verse says this: death and life are in the power of the tongue. So your words have power. You have the ability to say what you want and get it because you opened your mouth. Many of us don't get what we want, don't get what we need because we're so worried about what others are going to say, what others are going to think. If you want a raise, guess what? Ask for your raise. If you want to go somewhere, speak it into existence until it happens. And if we're really honest, we tend to hoard everything that we've been through. We tend to hoard all of the lies that people have told on us. We tend to hoard all of the mistakes we've made. And just like on the show Hoarders, y'all seen that show Hoarders? You know, from the outside, you would never know those persons were going through what they were going through because, you know, they were so, you know, so happy, so jolly on the outside. But when people stepped into their house, they say, how can someone live like this? And then I asked the question, how could they not live like this? Because as a caregiver, we go through some things like depression, anxiety, and I'll say it again, debt. Like, let's be honest. If you're not receiving funds from Medicaid or Medicare in order to be compensated for caregiving, guess what? You're essentially adding another person's to your, you know, to your bills. You have another mouth to feed. It was so crazy. My mother, being her caregiver, and I don't get funds to take care of my mother. I chose not to because we have persons that come into the house and everybody say, you know, you can get paid to, you know, take care of your mom. I understand that, and I'm telling people every day that you can get paid to take care. But I say, no, I don't want to do that. And so one thing, my mother was getting food stamps. And the thing that's so crazy is, let's just say the renewal application gets lost in mail. That means that they're going to take your food stamps away, which means now I have to figure out how we're going to purchase food so that my mother can get proper nutrition. Because yes, it's easy to go and get, you know, at Wendy's you can get the 4 for $4. Yep. It's easy to do that. But that's not gonna, you know, allow her to have a healthy life. I'm one of those persons that when I'm at home and I'm not on the road, I want to make sure my mother has healthy food. So before I left Virginia to come here on Thursday, I made sure that I cooked enough food that she had to eat until I got back home. And I do that on a regular basis because I want to make sure, you know, because, you know, yes, I can go on my Uber Eats app and just have something delivered to the house, but it may not be the healthiest thing. You know, so then we get to, oh, well, what are we going to eat? Well, I can tell somebody to stop at Wendy's and get a 4 for $4 and she'll, you know, be full for that moment, you know. But let's be really honest with ourselves. Let's be super honest with ourselves. And when we begin to start taking those masks off, then we're able to really be free and liberated. You know, so we can come to a moment like this and not have to worry about what's going on outside those doors. I mean, really, how many of y'all have checked your phone since you've been here? You've checked your phone since you've been here, you know. And those persons that are saying, no, I did not, I applaud you. I've been on my phone the whole time. Because I got to make sure my mom is straight. I got to make sure the organization is straight. Got to make sure church is straight. So when I land in the morning, I can go from the airport directly to church. And it will be as if no beat was missed. You know, but many of us don't get that opportunity to fly across country for a few days. Why? Because we don't have help. Let's be real. We don't have help or money. But here's the thing. Just like I said, life and death are in the power of your tongue. Everything you need is in the power of your tongue. So if you need help, guess what? Ask for it. Let me say these words, and I'm going to say it as loud as I can. You cannot do everything by yourself. You cannot do everything by yourself. And this just doesn't go for caregiving. This goes for every area of your life. That's why I appreciate when she introduced the planning team, because guess what? It could have been just one person that put this together, and they could have been stressed trying to make sure that every T was crossed and every I was dotted. But when you start looking at who you are and understand, the community that you have, guess what? There are persons that are willing to help you do everything. That's why I appreciate pastors that appoint persons in their congregation to do different things. Because here's the thing. Many of us expect our pastors and faith leaders to be all things to all people. Guess what? The pastor is not a mechanic. Don't ask your pastor to change a tire. Let me say this again. The pastor is not a medical doctor. Please don't ask your pastor for medical advice. George is a mental health professional. Send the people to George if you want some mental health information. Don't ask your pastor for mental health. So many times, we allow ourselves to put persons at such high regards and have such high expectations of what they're capable of doing when they are not capable at all. And we do ourselves a great disservice. We do ourselves a great disservice, not only to the situation, but to ourselves, because we are not willing to look outside of our familiarity. So you got to be willing, you got to be willing to sometimes just step out of the boat a little bit. You got to be willing to just step out just a little bit so that you can really see the possibilities. Trust me, this world has so many possibilities. I appreciate the internet and social media because it gives you the opportunity to see the possibilities. George mentioned YouTube. If you go to YouTube and just type how to do X, Y, and Z, you'll find how to do. Karen talked the other night about she went to YouTube to learn how to use her Instapot. If you don't know how to do it, you got to find out how to do it. You can't expect, and that goes back to what I just said, you can't expect everybody to know everything. I'm not a nurse. I do the best that I can, but if I need some nursing advice, I ask a nurse. I'm not a hairstylist. I do the best that I can, but if I need some information on how to do this and that, I ask a hairstylist or a barber. I'm sorry, I'm in his way. But you have to be willing to just say, hey, I'm only one person. I can only do but this much. And then when you're at your max, you have to be willing to just take your hands off of it. And especially if you have family. Like, I'm the caregiver to my mother, but I have siblings. Now, there have been many days that I have been frustrated. I have cried. I have fussed, and let's be real, I have cussed. Because I said, why am I the only one willing to do? And you know what my mother said? Well, you should talk to them and tell them what you need. No. But see, here's the thing, and it hit me because my sister said, you know what? I know I'm not able to do everything. My sister lives in a different city. I know I'm not able to do all that I can, but I thank you. And guess what? That thank you meant a whole lot. Because there are some of us in this room that we feel like, God, I just wish somebody appreciated me. I just wish that there was somebody that understood. guess what? There are persons who understand. I saw out there, there's a support group for caregivers, the second Tuesday. Right, sound generation. Please don't be too big that you can't go to a support group. I don't need to go to support group. I don't need to talk. Yes, you do. I believe everybody needs to talk to somebody. Let me say this again. I believe everybody needs to talk to somebody. Tell your neighbor you need to talk to somebody. Okay, now tell your other neighbor, no, I need to talk to somebody. Because the life of a caregiver can be a very silent life. Why? Because this one word, trust. Who can I trust with my feelings? Who can I trust? And it was so ironic. Yesterday, one question that was asked to me when I spoke, and she said, okay, so if I'm single, I don't have any kids, what if something happens to me? Who's going to be responsible for my affairs when it's all said and done? And really, it's a lonely road. Like, it's a lonely road. And I appreciate her for saying that she's a happy woman, but guess what? There are so many days where happy is so far away. Why? Because I don't know if what I'm going through is really going to make me happy. I don't know if what I put in place is going to give me pure happiness. But I asked the question, when you look in the mirror, who do you see? You got to be real honest about that person that's looking back at you. So if you want to believe that you're Beyonce, guess what? You have to continue to live your life in a manner that you're thinking, I am whoever I say I am. Let me say this again. I am whoever I say I am. I can be whatever I say I can be. I can have whatever I say I can have. And I'm not just reciting something that's familiar. I'm speaking real life. Because in order for you to get to where you're going, you got to first believe that you can get there. Guess what? Money is not an issue. Money is not an issue. Money is not an issue because you can have whatever you say that you want. You got to first believe it. Let me get that down in your spirit. You got to say what you want and then hold it. I remember a few years ago, and I've been with the organization for now 11 years. I know I look 25. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's funny because if you ask my mother how old I am, she's going to tell you exactly the age that I tell people, and that's 26 plus. So, and she does not deviate from that. If I say I'm 26 plus, guess what? No matter what that plus is, I'm going to be that. But I remember a few years ago, I said that I want to travel. I want to travel. I want to see, not the world, I want to see our country. Because, you know, far too long, we want to go to the islands and have a good time. There are some amazing places. And this is my first time in Seattle. I have had an amazing time since I've been here. And guess what? I'm coming back. I am coming back. But I said I wanted to see our country. And I didn't know 3 years ago that I would get promoted to this position and have the opportunity to see the country. So every time I go somewhere, I get a magnet and put it on my refrigerator. So my refrigerator is now starting to look like a world map, a United States map, because, I want to just relish in the places here in our country. Yes, I've been abroad. Yes, going abroad is wonderful. But guess what? We got to believe in what we have in our local areas. Seattle is a great city. And not only that, there are some great resources here. There are some amazing resources here. So don't think for a moment that you can't have what you need, because if you look out the room, there are plenty of resources for you to hold on to. And so I say that because I said I want to travel. I want to see this country. And my words spoke that into existence. I literally travel at least 3 to 4 days a week. So I'm like today, I leave tonight, fly back to Virginia, grab another suitcase, fly to Alabama. Like, that's how my life is set up now. And guess what? I have to be okay with it, because that's what I said I wanted. If I say I want it, then I gotta believe it. And then I can't get mad when it's given to me. So if you say, I want a new car, when you get that new car, don't fuss your new car out. You said you wanted a new car. Don't stress about how you're going to pay for it. That's what you said that you wanted. So I'm going to stop there. Any questions, any thoughts? I really want you to, maybe not so much even ask questions. I want you to ponder this moment we've shared. So anybody want to just tell me how they're feeling right now? Or tell me what they see when they really look in the mirror? Anybody? Y'all got scared? Y'all got quiet? I'm going to ask this brother. He spoke earlier, and I just want to know, you? When you look in the mirror, no, really, who do you really see?
I see a black man struggling but taking care of his business.
That's good. That's good. Because guess what? Struggle is not your end. Let me say that for somebody that needs to hear it. Struggling is not your end. It will not be the end of your story. All right, I'm going to ask you. Yes, you. I'm coming to you.
I see somebody who's enough. Yeah. Actually on my mirror, like, you are enough.
That's good. That's really good. Yes.
So, Cary, I know that the National Brain Health for African Americans is also very involved, in fact, initiated Memory Sunday. Can you talk a little bit about that?
You can always count on Karen to make sure I stay online, stay on focus. So Memory Sunday, it is one of our programs of the National Brain Health Center for African Americans. Memory Sunday is the second Sunday in June, and it is a Sunday where we want the faith community to address Alzheimer's, dementia, and caregiving. Now, one of the things I love about Memory Sunday is, yes, the pastor or the leaders of the church can get up and talk about it, but that's the Sunday that I say, bring your loved ones to church. because far too long, persons that we're caring for, we tend to isolate them from their normalcy. So if church was something that they did on a regular basis, and you often wonder, who mentioned it? I think it was George that mentioned about taking a loved one to somebody after 20 years and they thought that the person had died. There are situations like that, and churches are like, I thought sister such and such had died, and we didn't have a funeral. And you bring them on Memory Sunday, and you sing songs like Amazing Grace. Because guess what? They remember things like that. You recite scriptures like Psalms 23, the Lord is my shepherd. Why? Because there's something that I learned back in Vacation Bible School when I was really young. Y'all know what Vacation Bible School is. And so Memory Sunday is that Sunday that we say, we don't care what it takes, get them there. Now, see, here's the thing. Here's the thing. We do trainings and webinars with churches. We say, okay, perhaps creating a space in the church, it may not be in the sanctuary, because the sanctuary, all of the people, it may not be, they may not be able to handle it. So if they create a space, maybe in a fellowship hall or in another part of the church, some churches are large churches that have classrooms and things where persons can come, enjoy being amongst others and not feel so isolated. So the second Sunday in June, and here's the thing that I will say. Karen works very hard. This year she had 4 churches that participated here in Seattle for Memory Sunday. I want to triple that number for 2019. And I think that there are enough people in this room that can help make it happen. I'm pretty sure that there are at least 12 churches represented in this room. And it is not denomination-based. And let me also say this, yes, it is designed and focused for the African American community, but if your congregation is not African American, guess what? You can still host a Memory Sunday event. We can alter and change the language. Let me say that again. We can alter and change the language of the materials that are out so that it fits your congregation. And so I'm going to give you this charge to reach out to Karen so that you can jump on board. I am 100% a believer of collaborating and building coalitions. If we get enough churches in Seattle to just say, hey, we want to do something, do you know how impactful that will be to this city? We want to get the word out, we want to get the message out, but we got to get the message to the people. And if the people are coming to the pews, then we got to start using that. Next question or thought? I see you.
Hi, my name is Sharon Sobers Outlaw, and I'm a social worker. When Taylene Watson was talking, I thought of myself, Lord have mercy. But I'm trying to do better at that. I take my mom everywhere I go. My mother goes everywhere. She goes dancing. We go Zumba. I got her little male friend in the out of the deal, and we go line dancing on Saturday. We missed it today because we're here. We go boot camp line dancing, so I'm always doing stuff to stimulate her in every way I can. I try to go to church at least once a month because on Saturdays I work full time, and so we like to have Saturday mornings to relax a little bit, you know. But anyway, what I wanted to bring up was that I wasn't here from the beginning, but I wanted to mention that TB Snow, which is the positive approach to brain health. I don't know, nobody's talking about her, but she's excellent. Her videos are everywhere, and they talk about how many, there's like 100, different types of dementia, and different things. And this will give you a much more positive attitude about dealing with this. I hear a lot of us not moaning, but I hear us saying, oh, you know, this is happening and this is happening. Well, there's a positive way to look at this as well. And so I ask you to go to tbsnow.com and join and get on the mailing list. And she has videotapes and everything. And again, as I brought up last year, don't forget about Alexa. Alexa is a great help. Okay, so, and I want to get to know you better. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you. Y'all give it. TB Snow. Remember that. TB Snow. All right. TEEPA Snow. TEPA Snow. All right. Y'all correct me. I'm going to look it up. All right? All right.
I just want to do a little plug here for the Alzheimer's Association. There's a 24-hour helpline. And when you're having issues, maybe your loved one is sundowning, maybe there's some, you know, some frustration, maybe some flare-ups, that's an excellent number to call. You have master social workers who can actually work with you, help you to understand the symptoms, and develop some strategies about how you're going to better help and support your loved one as well as take care of yourself.
Yes, great organization. You had a question, comment?
I just wanted to add, I appreciate what you're doing for the churches, helping them to become aware of mental illness. And I want to do whatever I can also at Karen. I had the opportunity to be promoted to bishop in the Pentecostal Assemblies of the World this year. So I'm the thank you. Go ahead. So I am the bishop over the churches here in the state of Washington. And I love your spirit, and I'm connected with Church of God in Christ, Seventh-day Adventist, whoever, that God has given me that inroads. You will definitely have more churches in the state of Washington. Appreciate your spirit, and yes, you will be back.
All right, I got 2 more minutes. Any other? Right there. Okay, I'm coming. I see you.
My name is Christine Sinclair, and I am with an organization called Generations Aging with Pride. Our organization serves the LGBTQ community over 50 years old. And as you can imagine, as people of color, as African Americans over 50 years old, and either being lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgendered, this is a group of people that is a subculture of our subculture, and often very isolated, often do not have family members to provide care for them, and often are ostracized in the medical community, social service community. And so I want to let you know that we're there, we're here in this community, Generations Aging with Pride, and that we are here to support African Americans of the LGBT community and connect them with services and education and care providers, and also education for care providers. Just want you to keep us in mind and call on us. And if you know people who need services, care providers who are working with LGBT elders, African Americans, call us and let us help.
All right. The Balm of Gilead, yes. So the Balm of Gilead, we're a national organization, or actually international, because we have an office in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, and we work with the faith community to address health disparities. And so we do various programs, such as the National Week of Prayer for the Healing of AIDS. We do Memory Sunday through our National Brain Health Center for African Americans. And we also have a diabetes prevention program. And that's where we are in 5 churches in 5 states doing pre-diabetes programs for individuals. So yeah, so that's what we do. So lastly, I'll say this. Just take a moment. Close your eyes. Come on, close your eyes. Yes, don't be afraid. Nobody's gonna steal anything from you. Close your eyes. And just think of yourself in a place that you really wanna be. Just think of that place. And take a deep breath and exhale. Now think of yourself in this place doing something. Regardless, don't worry about money. Money's not an issue. Doing whatever you want to do in this place. Then take a deep breath in and exhale. Okay, one more breath. Inhale and exhale. And I'll end on this. In order for you to have and do whatever you want to do, you have to first imagine it. You have to first imagine it. You can have whatever your heart's desires. You just have to take that moment and allow yourself to breathe in and exhale. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Dr. Jim deMain is a certified pulmonary critical care physician from Group Health Speak. Well, anyway, his interest is in advocacy and education, so the rights of individuals are respected. Since he retired, he has been actively involved in giving presentations about end-of-life planning to a number of community groups, including Group Health, Rotary, town halls, faith organizations, private clubs, and has been a guest of KEXP and KUOW Radio. So, here you go, Doctor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm really honored to be here. Is my voice projecting okay? What I'd like to do is take you through some stories about what I experienced as a physician working in pulmonary critical care area, obviously very sick people, where end-of-life situations came up and decisions were difficult. One statistic you might know that about half of us, when we're in our last period of life, aren't able to participate in the conversation about what's going to be done in terms of medical interventions. So the main takeaway I would have today is that it's so important to have an advocate, what we would call your durable power of attorney for healthcare, somebody that is close to your heart, understands your feelings, your wishes, and is a strong advocate, can stand up sometimes to other family members, sometimes to the doctors, and really forcefully represent your point of view. Because one of the things, the ethical principles in medicine is you have the right to the type of care that you want and of course deserve. And that's a big responsibility that we all need to address in our end-of-life planning wishes. I'd like to just tell you a story about a fellow that I was taking care of. He had very severe emphysema. He'd smoked too many years and quit too late. But he was in and out of the hospital with flare-ups of his disease. He required steroids and all kinds of antibiotics and other medications. And then he required oxygen, but was still in and out of the hospital. And I could tell that he was probably in his last stages of his disease. And he was in my office one day and he said, "Hey, Doc, I want to take you out to lunch." And I was a little taken back because the guy was kind of a super salesman, and I was kind of worried what he was going to, try to sell to me. And what he was really wanted to address was what was going to be done at the end of his life. He was afraid of suffocating. He'd had multiple experiences in a hospital where he couldn't breathe. He said, "Listen, I want help at the end." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "I just don't want to suffer. I don't want to be like a fish out of water and gasping. It's just terrifying." So I said, "Well, there are things you can do. I'm not Dr. Kevorkian. We don't do lethal injections and that kind of thing. But the drug that is most useful in that situation is morphine. He said, well, what would that do? And I said, well, it takes away your shortness of breath, gives you a sense of euphoria and peace, and you could become sleepy. Any pain you have would be resolved, and it can be given in small doses to titrate your discomfort. The downside of that, though, is that it might speed up your death by a matter of hours or even days. He said, those days aren't important to me. The important thing is that I really don't want to suffer. So I said, well, talk it over with your sons, and he did. And he called me back later and said the family was in agreement. And things went on, and then a couple months later, I got a call from the emergency room. And they said that my patient was there, and they wanted to put him in the intensive care unit. And I said, well, I'm not sure he really belongs in the intensive care unit. Let me come in and see him. So when I got into the ER, he was kind of blue and gasping, but he looked me in the eye and he said, remember what we talked about? So I said, yeah, we can use these small doses of morphine. He said, well, that's what I want. So I did not put him in the ICU. If you go into the intensive care unit, I always said, if you go into a barber shop, you're very likely to get a haircut. And if you go into an ICU, you're going to get high technology. You're going to get CPR. You're going to get respirators. And otherwise, you really shouldn't be there. So we put him on the medical unit. There were some very experienced nurses. They were able to titrate his discomfort, and he died peacefully at about 3 in the morning. I got a wonderful letter back from his sons saying how wonderful it was that Dad got what he wanted at the end. If he could come back, he would shake your hand. So that's what I would call a good death. I don't know if good is the right word, but at least a good enough death. We're all going to face that at some point, which makes this talk a little bit difficult, but that time is going to come for us all, and we need to take a little time now and then to think about it. Martin Luther King said, if a man hasn't discovered something he will die for, he isn't fit to live. So the focus, of course, is on living and not focusing on death. I think denial is healthy. We go on with our daily lives, but there does come a point where we need to think about the inevitable. So we have a number of rights. So we have a right to make decisions about life-sustaining treatment. We have a right to have a way to inform our healthcare practitioners about what our wishes are. And in these days, we have a right to have healthcare practitioners that are skilled in addressing our needs one way or the other. There's a thing in medicine called shared decision-making, and this is really the best way of coming to an agreement with your physician, having a discussion, having them be a good listener, and then sharing the decision as you move forward. But the ultimate call is yours. You can always say, I don't want a treatment, or I don't want this, or I do want that. So along with rights comes responsibilities, because if you don't make your wishes known, we're going to be in limbo. And in the intensive care unit, if there was somebody who was on a ventilator, the family was struggling with how long we should go on with this, and there's disagreement among the family. If there's never been a prior discussion, then we're kind of stuck. And sometimes we end up prolonging death rather than prolonging life by the overuse of what we can do technologically. Karen, it's not working again.
It's moving. You're moving.
Oh, it's moving? Oh, okay. It's not moving on the screen. All right. So what I'll try to cover today is to clarify our values, how to do that, how to choose a spokesperson, how to understand treatments, and then trying to explain the differences in the various advanced care directives that we have. So how will others know what our wishes are? We really have to talk about them. There is a website that Ellen Goodman put together. It's called the Conversation Project. She's a Pulitzer Prize winning author. Her mother had what she would call a really bad, very difficult death. So the family hadn't gotten together. There were no directives. And the Conversation Project is a very worthwhile website. If you're wondering, how can I talk to my family about this? They have starter kits you can download, have various scenarios, videos, that kind of thing, and also in different languages for different cultures. So it's become a very good kind of go-to website. When you do fill out your directives, you have to make sure that you give copies to your loved ones, to your attorney, and make sure that they're updated and stored in a place that they can be found. So what is an acceptable quality of life? That's an individual decision for each of us. Some of us might feel strongly in one direction, and some feel very strongly in another direction. But given the nature of your illness, what are your biggest hopes and what are your biggest fears? If we had time, unfortunately we don't right now, but if we had time, I think this is something you need to sit down with your loved ones and really talk about those questions. You know, what are your fears? Is it pain? Is it being alone and not having other people with you? Is it not making peace with God? Is it not saying you're sorry to other people? Is it the fear that you may wind up not so happy in your next life? So there's a lot of potential, both hopes and fears that we have. And as our previous speaker said, you know, we need to be able to trust and be able to talk to someone about those. So what about the end of life? Where would you like to be at the end of life? Some of the discussion this morning was the desire to keep somebody at home, but the difficulty as that time progresses to the point where you don't really have the resources or strength to continue. But most of us would like to be at home or in a home-like environment, at least. We only die once. We have no time to practice. So what is a good death or a healing death? And I was asked this by Katie Sewell on KUOW a number of years ago, and I hadn't really thought through very carefully, but I said, well, it's really having our wishes trusted and adhered to. Whatever we had expressed, that should be good for us. So I think, you know, a lot of us want to have a sense of a legacy. We want our loved ones around us. We want to be at peace. We don't want to be suffering. Those are the kind of things that I think we're striving for that ultimate period in our lives. So healthcare today, we can cure illness. There are just wonderful things available now that weren't available even to our parents or grandparents. We have things like penicillin, and as we age, we get new joints. We get all kinds of conditions cared for and improved quality of life. The kind of videos we saw on exercise and strengthening, preventing falls, all those things are allowing us to lead productive lives. Today is my daughter's 50th birthday, which obviously dates me because I was some 30 years old when she was born. So with that math, you can kind of guess where I am on my journey. So there's been some good news here as things go. Some of our death rates are falling, like from breast cancer and prostate cancer. Certainly HIV, as it's come under control. I lived through the HIV era, which was terrible because my first few patients just progressively died because we did not have the adequate, excellent treatments that we have now for HIV. But as noted, the Alzheimer's incidence and death rates have certainly climbed, and that's unfortunately going to be something that will continue. There's a condition now called the Silver Tsunami. That is the aging population, the big bulge that is coming, and certainly with the baby boomers now aging into their mid-60s, there's going to be more and more difficulty with Alzheimer's, care management. How do we do caregiving when everybody's working? There's wonderful organizations here that are working on that, but we've got still a tough road in front of us. Causes of death really haven't changed too much. Cancer and heart disease are certainly at the forefront, and other diseases, unfortunately, self-harm and accidents are on this list. We need to continue to address the issues of self-harm. Now, this is worldwide mortality. This is from the humor magazine, The Onion. And as you might see, we still face the inevitable fact that none of us gets out of this world alive. Somebody asked me if I updated the slide. I said, no, I don't think it needs updating. So somebody asked a philosopher once, how would you like to die? And he said, well, when I least expect it. So not many of us go that way anymore. Actually, with cholesterol management, blood pressure management, and exercise and other things, the incidence of heart attacks is actually falling, and 911 calls are not so much for cardiac arrest as they are for other things that are going on, like falls. But there is some of the population that does die quickly. Of course, that's very hard on the loved ones because there's no preparation. More commonly, we go like this. We start with a reasonable amount of health, and then a flare-up in an illness, and then a decline, and there's always something that happens at the end. And if you have to just read one book about this, Atul Gawande has a book called Being Mortal. It talks about a lot of stories about his experience as a Harvard surgeon, but his own family, his father from India dying. And one of the chapters in the book is letting go. You know, if you have a cancer or something like that, and you progress and you get more sick, and you're on chemotherapy and you're getting tired of that, at what point can you say enough? I had dinner last evening with a woman who says, I'm going to take one more chemo, and that's it. I think I've done as much as I really want to do here. And it's a decision you can't really make ahead of time. It's only when you're in the circumstance, you're experiencing your quality of life, and then you have to say, okay, it's time to go. And in the intensive care unit, sometimes I'll see a patient kind of hanging on. They're beginning to die, but they're still going on, and a family member will go in and talk to them and said, Dad, it's really okay. You know, Mom's okay, we're okay, and I know you're ready to go, and it's all right. You know, we're okay. And sometimes that's just enough for the dying person to let go themselves. But the family needs to let go. We need to finally see that the inevitable is there. But that's an individual path that we're all on. It's not something that you can do in some kind of advanced directive way. So we do become very sick before we die. And this is a video I'll show, hopefully it works here, that Angelo Volandes and his wife put together. He's a Harvard internist, and his wife is an African American, Aretha Delight Davis, who's not just a doctor but also a lawyer. And together they put together this video that talks about end-of-life choices that we have.
I'd like to talk to you about decisions you might have to make in the future if you become very sick. I'll show you some examples of medical care to help you understand your options for the kind of medical care you can have in the hospital. Then, I would like to ask you about what kinds of treatments you would want if you were hospitalized. Keep in mind, in these situations, you may or may not be able to tell your doctors what you want. Knowing what you want now and telling others in advance may help make things easier in the future for both you and your family. You might find it difficult to discuss this, but as it turns out, different people have different ideas about what is best for them. If we talk about your choices ahead of time, you can let your doctors know now what you would want if you were to become very sick. People sometimes change their minds about these decisions, and that is normal. But it's a good idea to start thinking now about what you would want if you become very sick. Here is one way to help you start thinking about your choices. Basically, there are 3 general approaches to medical care if you become very sick. They are life-prolonging care, limited medical care, and comfort care. Let's review these 3 general approaches together. The first approach is life-prolonging care. With this approach, the main goal is to prolong life. This means that your doctors would do everything they could to keep you alive. They would perform cardiopulmonary resuscitation or CPR. CPR tries to get your heart to beat again if it stops. This involves pressing on your chest and using an electric shock in an attempt to restart your heart. Most of the time in patients with an advanced disease, CPR does not work. If you choose this approach, you would also agree to have a ventilator or breathing machine if you needed to breathe. This involves putting a tube down your throat into your lungs and connecting you to a machine that pushes air into your lungs. You cannot eat or talk while on this machine. While on a breathing machine, you will likely need very strong medications. These medications are usually given in the intensive care unit or ICU. Life-prolonging procedures may or may not restore you to your previous health. With a life-prolonging approach, you choose to have these procedures in exchange for the possibility of a longer life. The second choice is limited medical care. With this approach, prolonging life is still important, but not if it means having CPR or being placed on a breathing machine. People who choose limited medical care would like medicines for treatable problems that may arise, such as fluid in the lungs or a urine infection. This approach lets you have different medical treatments, including hospital care, antibiotics, other medicines, and fluids through a vein. People who choose limited medical care do not want procedures such as CPR or breathing machines. They would choose to avoid these procedures even if without them they would die. The third choice is comfort care. The main goal of this approach is to maximize comfort and relieve your symptoms. Treatments are only used if they help control uncomfortable symptoms, such as pain, trouble breathing, or feeling sick to your stomach. The main goal is not to prolong life, it is to maximize your comfort. People who choose this approach are usually treated at home, in hospice, or sometimes in a nursing home. Comfort care does not include CPR and breathing machines, and usually would not include hospitalization unless it is needed to provide comfort. People who choose comfort care choose to avoid these procedures even though without them they would die. The goal of this approach is to maximize comfort and relieve symptoms. I hope this has helped you understand the different choices you and your healthcare team might make in the future. Choosing among the three approaches, life-prolonging care, limited medical care, and comfort care, is one way your doctors will make sure that you receive the type of medical care you want if you become very sick. I strongly encourage you to talk to your doctor and to your family about your preferences. If you let your doctor, family, and friends know your choices, they can help carry out and protect your rights and wishes if you become very sick.
So this video kind of outlines the potential of doing everything, prolonging life. In this situation, I can tell you another story, a couple of stories about the ICU. One is a lady who had very advanced cancer and wanted to keep going with treatment. She was convinced that a miracle could occur, and she eventually decided to go out of the country and get some alternative treatment, probably in Mexico. And often these treatments are things like steroids or something that might make people feel better temporarily. But anyway, while on her way back, she got very sick on the airplane and ended up having a 911 call from SeaTac Airport and was admitted to our ICU. And unfortunately, she wanted just to continue on with treatment, and the family supported her wishes. And she was dying, but the ethics of the situation, we continued to support her treatment, and she died on a ventilator at about 2.5 weeks later. At the end, we basically refused to do CPR, the chest compressions, because it was completely futile. But there are situations where people demand that. We had one at Group Health many years ago that was on a ventilator for a year in our intensive care unit. And anytime we had a discussion with the family, they threatened to call the Seattle Times or get a lawyer. So sometimes you do end up in an adversarial situation, but not very often. Hospitals now have ethics committees where you can bring somebody in from the outside and try to help resolve what direction things ought to go into. In an extreme situation, a hospital can say, we can't continue this kind of treatment here. We'll give you a couple of weeks to try to find another institution where you can take your loved one. But those are unusual. I did have another lady who was about 75. She came in acutely ill with a rupturing abdominal aneurysm. It was the large vessel, and her belly was swelling and about to burst. So she was critically ill, had to be taken directly to surgery, had a big Teflon graft put in for the major blood vessels. And I got a call from the surgeon at about 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon, of course. It was about this time. that he had a patient very, very ill, and would I mind taking care of her in the intensive care unit. So we supported her on a respirator. We gave her IVs and feedings, but her kidneys weren't working very well. The lungs were developing what we call adult respiratory distress syndrome. So the lungs were kind of shutting down. Of course, we had her sedated. She was unconscious. Heart function was marginal. So she was just kind of hanging on. But she stabilized, and after about 2 weeks, she got a bacterial infection in her bloodstream, again, very sick. So we gave her big antibiotics. But she had a son who was a Bellevue firefighter, and he would come in and say, "Hey, Mom, listen, you're going to get through this. You're going to get better. We're going to get on that airplane, and we're going to go down to Puerto Vallarta, and we're going to have a beer down there. So come on, Mom." He was really cheerleading. Nice guy. We didn't know how realistic he was. But anyway, she kept going. At about 4 weeks, she developed a fungal infection in her bloodstream. And with this fungus growing out of her blood, and it's another complication when you're in a hospital for a long period of time. Again, we gave her the drugs. She seemed to respond. Then at about 6 weeks, the nurses were beginning to wonder, and I was wondering too, whether we were really doing a good thing for this woman. I mean, were we really gonna have a chance to get her through? She didn't have an underlying disease like cancer or Alzheimer's or bad heart disease, but I would give her maybe a 10 or 20% chance of making it, and this certainly was enough for her son. He said, "Come on, Mom, no, let's keep going, let's keep pushing ahead." And then at about 7 or 8 weeks, suddenly she just turned a corner. The lungs started getting better, kidney function picked up, heart function improved, and gradually we were able to get all the tubes and IV lines out, and she transferred off to the medical unit and then out to a rehab center, and I really didn't get any further follow-up from her then. I wish my wife were here because she would tell you the story is true, because we were with my 2 kids down at SeaTac Airport on spring break, getting on a plane to go to Puerto Vallarta for vacation, and guess who was on that plane with us? And we actually had a beer together down in Puerto Vallarta. So this is all very humbling. We don't know what's going to happen. If you ask a doctor, how long do I have? They might give you some statistical information, but each individual is an individual, and so we can't really make those kind of predictions. I always told my patients that God heals and the doctor sends the bill, and they would always laugh. Well, I'm going to be talking a little bit about hospice and palliative care. What I did for the gentleman with emphysema that I gave morphine, we would now call palliative care. There's a wonderful center at Harborview for palliative care training. They have a big grant from the Cambia Foundation, and it's now a specialty in medicine. And palliative care really means an approach, a holistic approach to the patient where we're dealing with their whole picture, their symptoms, their family structure, their social structure, and trying to develop a plan, kind of a multidisciplinary plan of treating the symptoms, focusing more on the symptoms than the disease. Because if you're in the hospital with heart disease, kidney problems, and liver problems, you might see a bunch of different specialists, but you don't feel your care is coordinated. And if that happens, you tend to fall through the cracks, and then a good plan isn't being made. So if you're hospitalized and it's a confusing situation, do ask for a palliative care consultation. And there are some consultations also available on an outpatient basis. So these are certainly a wonderful consideration to have. Palliative care works closely with hospice, but the hospice generally applies when you're in your last 6 months of life. Have any of you here had experience with hospice? Wow, okay. What kind of experience was it maybe we can pick up a few comments from people. Do we have the mic? But the reason I'm asking that is historically the African American community has not had great trust in hospice. That is changing with education and exposure, but the use of hospice in the African American community nationally it's been around 10% where of people that are dying, and now in other communities it might be as high as 50%. So let's hear a comment.
So I don't have a personal experience with hospice, but I'm employed with Providence Hospice of Seattle, and I am a advanced clinical hospice and palliative care specialist, social worker. So I am working with families out in the community that do have loved ones on hospice. And you're right, hospice is unknown in the to a lot of people in the African American community. But as of late, I have served about 30 African American families out of probably the 500 patients that I've served since I've been working with them.
Thank you very much. There's another hand back there.
I would like to say that I had experience when I took care of my sister and when I took care of a neighbor for 8.5 years. And they were magnificent. The lady from Group Health, her name was Margot, I'll never forget it. She called me all the time. They were right on board anytime we need medical supplies or a nurse to come. So I have a great experience with hospice.
Any other comments?
This would be my opportunity to be, to put in my plug for hospice. My mother received care from Providence Hospice. Amen. And she had a situation where she was not supposed to make it through 3 weeks. She came from the hospital into skilled nursing. And while she was in skilled nursing, the doctor there suggested another level of care, and that happened to be hospice. Hospice was able to bring her home to her house. Everything that a person could possibly need was there in that home. She was triaged there. She had 24-hour medical management and supervision. We had staffings once a week in her dining room. And that woman survived 6 months after hospice, went from hospice into Harborview Palliative Care, and from Harborview Palliative Care, she's now under straight geriatric care. It's been a year, and she wants me to give her testimony to let you know that if you have a family that will support you and you get your business straight in advance, get things in writing, let people know what you need, it helps. But the thing is that you sometimes may not have enough medical insurance, so you may have to use Medicare, Medicaid, and hospice. But hospice has federal monies that the other ones don't have. But if you could get that package together for your loved one, it would be wonderful. So I'm just the daughter that is the durable power of attorney of a woman who wants me to give her testimony that the devil didn't want her and God wasn't ready for her yet.
Maybe one more, and then we're gonna have to wrap this part up.
Yeah, my mom also had the hospice. She was in the hospital. They over-medicated her. She had a seizure. They over-medicated her. Then she had to sleep all of that off. They wanted to put a tube in her stomach. My sister and I just really worked on her to swallow, get her swallowing going. That happened. We got her on hospice. She was on hospice for 4 years.
Huh.
And hospice kept, we had a nurse every single week. And it was paid for, like this woman, Medicare, and mom had some good insurance as well. Yeah. And she had long-term care. Mom planned well, so she also had long-term care as well, which allowed us to bring in the caregivers to help us. So by planning, I see having had a mother who planned well, we were able to care for her at the highest level possible to keep her comfortable and peaceful and happy for 4 years while she was in bed.
Yeah, that was a great gift your mother gave you. So, what I'd like to...
Do you want more?
I think we better save the Q&A for the end so we can finish this part of it. I'd love to spend more time. I usually have an hour and a half or two to do this presentation, but we're a little limited today. So hospice is a benefit. It adds a lot of items to your insurance, whether Medicare or other insurance companies. You get durable medical equipment, as mentioned, a nurse available 24/7. Your medications become covered. So there's a lot of pluses. Generally, to get into hospice, they have to expect you to die within 6 months, but you don't have to die within 6 months. And some people get better and actually leave hospice for a while and then get back into it later. As far as I'm concerned, they are a bunch of little angels out there to help us over and over again. They also have volunteers that will come in and sit with you and give respite. It is really great for caregivers because it gives them a break and they can help arrange other caregivers as well. So it takes some of the pressure, not all of the pressure, it takes some of the pressure off. So the necessity of advanced directives, what it does is it extends our autonomy. If we get in writing and if we get a power of attorney to help with healthcare decisions, we're extending our ability to, in quotes, keep control over the situation as much as we can, or at least have a much better chance of having our wishes respected and adhered to. So who will speak for you? That's your durable power of attorney. And I think I already addressed who's best for the job. Some people don't have anybody at all. You know, they really feel alone in the world and really don't have anybody they can trust. There is an organization called the Washington State Health Advocacy Association. They're kind of people with a small shop, if you will. They get together and provide various advocacy services. Most of them are on a fee-for-service basis, but I think there's some subsidy available. In Washington State, there's kind of a pecking order as to who can make decisions for you when you can't for yourself, or when you're unable. You're no longer able to participate in the conversation. So who speaks for you is very important. If there's a situation where there's a legal guardian involved, of course that individual would be the decision maker. But in general, it's the person who's got the durable power of attorney. That can be a family member, it can be a spouse, it can be a best friend, it can be somebody you hire. But that person then has the legal authority to work with your healthcare team and make medical decisions for you when you are no longer able to do that for yourself. So it's a very powerful document. And as a physician practicing at the bedside, that's the person I need to turn to and conference with, not to exclude the other family members, but to focus on that person because they're expressing your wishes. So that durable power of attorney, if you're going to take just one thing away from today, I think, or from this talk, is to really think about that document. And you should have it no matter how old you are. I gave a talk at the law school to young attorneys, and they were discussing one of these situations where a young woman went off the side of a road and wasn't found until a day later, and she ended up being in a persistent vegetative state with a feeding tube. And the hospital, or the family wanted the tube removed and to allow the young woman to die. The hospital said, no, this would be killing her. And that went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said if it would have been her wish, as expressed by the family, to have the feeding tube removed, then they allowed the tube to, that was a very important legal case to allow withdrawal of life support when a person would want that. So if there isn't a durable power of attorney for health care listed, they would turn to your spouse or your registered domestic partner. Number 4 is the difficult one here. Let's say there is no spouse, but you've got 4 children, and they're gathered around the bedside, and the doctor's talking to them, and you're unconscious, you can't participate in the conversation. They all have to agree on a plan, and that can be really difficult, because there's usually one kid, at least, if not all of them, that will disagree on what ought to be done. And there's so many emotions in that phase of life. You know, there's guilt, there's hopes, there's different experiences that they've all had. So you need to have at least one of them appointed if you're going to choose a child. Some people will choose 2 co-equal. What I've done for myself is I have them listed. My social work daughter gets to go number 1, and then the other are 2 and 3. But it's a good idea to have alternates because somebody might not be immediately available. So briefly, the Washington State Death with Dignity law, this doesn't really come up in advanced planning, but it's something that is considered if you have a terminal illness certified by 2 doctors. You do have the right under Washington State law to self-administer a lethal drug, a barbiturate, which will cause death within minutes. The law is pretty carefully set up so that it can't be abused. Nobody else can give the medication. Your surrogate can't order it for you. You have to be mentally competent. So there's about 1 in 500 deaths in Washington State every year are related to the Death with Dignity law. A lot of people feel they just want to have that right. They may never exercise it. Some people get the medication and they never take it. It's much more commonly used in the college-educated white community, and it's probably, you know, the people that are in high control mode, or the business executives, or the people that opt for that. It's not nearly as common as I understand it in the African American community, and that probably will remain that way for some period of time. But it is an option we all have, and there was one in a community where I lived that occurred recently. It was a lady who was about 85. She had Lou Gehrig's disease. She was no longer able to walk. Her muscles were becoming paralyzed. She was no longer able to swallow. She was choking on secretions, but she was mentally alert. And it finally got to a stage where she had to have a tracheotomy done and a partial respirator, at least for use at home. And she decided that was enough. And her family was with her. They had a ceremony in her room, and she died peacefully with that mode. So it is a possibility we all have. If you have any questions or you want to research that at all, End of Life Washington, which used to be called Compassionate Choices, they have a lot of education and support and can help you, direct you to a provider. So what forms do you need to fill out, or can you fill out? And these are available online. If you just put in advanced directives, you can find these. Certainly attorneys will fill them out. And Stephanie Haslam will join me up here in a few minutes. She's an elder law attorney, and we'll talk more about how you can access the forms and expand on that. But I keep harping about the durable power of attorney for healthcare. I think that's so important. The living will is a statement of values. In the handout I gave you, I have a list of resources, some books and web, but on the back of that I have a statement that a patient handed to me one time. It's like a long paragraph of what their hopes and fears and wishes are. And that's very valuable. You can fill out a statement like that and you can attach it to your advanced directives, because the more the doctor knows about you as an individual at the bedside, we're making these difficult decisions. And if you've written out something and explained something more in detail than just a checkbox, then we're a lot more comfortable in making those decisions. The form I wanted to talk a little bit about, and then Stephanie will come up and join me, is the Physician Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment, the Polst Form. Any of you familiar with this form? Yeah, quite a few are. This form kind of arrived on the scene in Washington maybe 15 or so years ago. It used to be that when you were on hospice or you had a terminal illness, so you might wear a wristband in hope that somebody would find it, but it wasn't a sure thing. I had one patient that was on hospice at home, and the the daughter who was caring for the mom went out for some shopping, and a neighbor sat with the patient who suddenly passed away. But they didn't have, this was in the very early days, they didn't have any markings or any assurance other than the wristband, which nobody saw. So the neighbor panicked and called 911. So 911 arrives and does CPR, revives her, put her on a respirator, and brought her into our emergency room. And the daughter arrived shortly after, almost screaming mad, because that's the last thing that she ever wanted to have happen to her mom. So that sometimes it's difficult to find the wristbands and that kind of thing, but now with this form, I call it the 911 form. It's bright green so it can be found. It's often at the foot of the bed of somebody that's terminally ill, or it can be on your refrigerator. It is actual medical orders. You can say, I do want CPR, I don't want CPR. I do want limited medical care, or I only want comfort care. And that form is actual medical orders. It's signed by the doctor and it's signed by you. It's what I love about that. I wish all our medical stuff was that way. So they're mutually agreed upon signature about what you would want, and they are legal medical orders for 911 to follow. And 911 loves it. They don't want to do CPR on you. I mean, I've given some talks where some of the medics have been there, and they say, gee, I start compressing the chest, and I know I'm breaking ribs, and I know I'm causing discomfort. It's the last thing I want to do. And the nurses hated to do it in the ICU for somebody that was terminally ill. They called it medical last rites. So we don't want to overuse technology in a situation where it might cause suffering. It's the last thing we want to do. So this form is very important if you're in your last year of life or frail elderly. Somebody asked me, well, what does it mean to be frail elderly? I said, well, maybe somebody at least 10 years older than you are. So, but when you're beginning to fall or you have a serious chronic illness, you can now go into your doctor under Medicare and most insurance plans and actually have an end-of-life discussion. That's the reason for visit. Medicare will actually reimburse that. That was a big fight in Congress, as you may remember, when the death panel thing was so worried about. The doctors were going to figure out a way to end your life sooner by doing that. And it couldn't have been more off base than that. So this form needs to be in a place where it can be found if you are very seriously ill and are caring for somebody who's seriously ill. It's a huge favor if they can find that. There are directives for dementia. You can find those online. Dr. Gassner at the University of Washington has a very easy to follow dementia. So if you're in those very early phases and still able to be competent to make decisions, you can fill out a dementia directive. Of course, if you're in advanced stages, you're really unable at that point to do directives on your own. There is another directive with End of Life Washington, which is drawn up by a lawyer. It's more than 13 pages long, but it's very complete if you want to really dot all the I's and cross the T's. And that's available from them by calling them or from their website. So in the facility where I live, which is kind of a retirement community on First Hill, we have everybody in the building put their Polst Form on the inside of their kitchen cabinet door. So it's standardized for the building because nobody wants to look at their Polst Form every day on the refrigerator. But when you're over in assisted living or skilled nursing, then they're in a much more prominent spot. So Stephanie, can you come on up? Let's take some questions and hopefully we'll have a few answers as well. So this is Stephanie Haslam, who's an elder law attorney in practice here in Seattle. We just met today.
Yep, we did.
Went on the phone a few times. I don't know if we have another microphone, but why don't you go ahead?
Okay. Oh, this one?
Whoops.
Thank you. Glad you're tall.
There we go. I'm just bowling.
Oh, wow. Hello, can you hear me? Oh, this is great. Hi. I'm Stephanie Haslam. I am an elder law and estate planning attorney. And what led me to my career in law, working with seniors, was I was an occupational therapist, and I worked with seniors with disabilities, with different stages of disease and chronic illness, and saw the things that they and their families were dealing with on a daily basis, and things that were interfering with their dignity and their choices. And so it led me to a career in law that really allows for people to say what they want, to memorialize what they want, so it's more likely to happen. One of the biggest objections I hear about people doing their documents ahead of time, about doing powers of attorney ahead of time, is a fear of losing control. Has anyone had that fear of like giving up control if you sign over the documents? And I tell people, I said, it's actually the opposite. When you sign those documents, you're intentionally choosing who makes a decision for you. Who's the first choice? Who's your second choice? Who's your third choice? Someone who knows you, someone who you've spoken with about what's important to you. By not saying so ahead of time, you're leaving it up to default. Whoever is the loudest in the family may be the one that's making the decisions for you. So I do want to encourage you to really look at doing these documents. Now, it is expensive to go to an attorney to get these done, I get that. And usually people that maybe just need the healthcare aspect of it could do it on their own. And for a lawyer to say that, that's a big deal. But I really think it's important to memorialize what you want, even if that's the way you do it, with an online document. So what you want to know about this online document, if you do choose one to print out a power of attorney for healthcare with the living will or the advanced directive, make sure you have it witnessed when you sign it. 2 witnesses who are unrelated to you, who are not your healthcare providers. And also what may be really helpful is to have it notarized at the same time. When you do the document, you want it to be valid. So make sure you're following those steps. Another tip would be to make sure your healthcare decision maker has a copy of that form, and that your doctor has a copy of that form. And then that way, it's more likely the communication's going to flow, and things that you have said ahead of time are likely to happen. So just a few things I wanted to just point out, and then I don't know if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, let's open it up at this point, because I know there a lot of people have had experience with end-of-life situations, or have questions that either I could address on the medical side or Stephanie more on the legal side. Okay. coming.
Run, Karen.
As a social worker, I've worked with lots of people on their advanced healthcare directives, but until I encountered it in my own life, I really didn't understand exactly what they're talking about, hydration. That seems to be a very, very sensitive topic with people and the relatives. And could you talk a little bit more about what
Sure.
hydration is and when that's necessary and when it's not okay?
Sure. Hydration really just means replacement of fluids. It could be water, or it could be enough fluid in your feedings, but you know, we all need a couple of quarts of water a day. Just tell you a story about my father. I got a call from Western Pennsylvania from my sister. My dad was 94, slipping very gradually away, but he quit eating, and then eventually he quit drinking. And it's a really great place he was in. They were doing good mouth care and everything, but the question is, should we give him hydration at that point? He had said that he really didn't want anything interventional at the end. It would have mean either IV fluids or putting a tube down in his stomach and giving him nutrition as well as fluids. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to use hydration without nutrition, because then you're just starving somebody and it's going to take a longer period of time to die. So we elected to follow his wishes, and he slipped into coma. They gave him good mouth care. He even took a few sips now and then, and it took about 3 or 4 days for him to pass away without fluid nutrition. This is the old way to die, you know. And historically, we kind of all went that way before this these days of intervention now. There's a conference at Seattle U last year on a subject called Voluntary Stopping Eating and Drinking, called VSED. And some people have elected that are descending into early dementia and say, I just don't want to go there. I've watched other family members, and they decide to voluntarily stop eating and drinking. And they have a doctor help them with medications and a supportive spouse and a supportive team. But without hydration, yeah, you're not going to last more than about 5 days, kind of max as a rule. So that's kind of what we mean by hydration, is the fluid replacement that is so necessary for living.
And what I would say about the fluid question, to explain where that occurs in the decision making, the power of attorney for healthcare is giving permission for someone to make health decisions. When a person's toward end of life and two doctors have said it looks like it's end of life, then they talk about the advanced directives. And they ask the family or the caregiver or the decision maker, should we continue providing the hydration? And that person ahead of time in my document, have said, no, if I'm at end of life, don't continue hydration. Also, we'll ask about nutrition. They'll ask about antibiotics. You know, if a person acquires an infection, if they're in this comatose state, and they acquire an infection, sometimes it's a natural way to pass more quickly to let the infection take its course. So by saying so ahead of time, you allow your agent the flexibility to say no to an antibiotics when it may be a futile thing to have antibiotics. And you can also say the same thing for other heroic measures. So the two documents together, you can really have a say, you know, how your health decisions are made day to day if you can't make decisions, or also to the end of life at the advanced directive decision-making process.
Yeah, there was a physician here in Seattle that surveyed colleagues, this is back many years ago. It said if you had a patient with severe Alzheimer's, end-stage Alzheimer's in a nursing home, and they hadn't recognized their family in years, and they were pretty much bedbound, but you got a call at night, and they had 104 fever, probably from a urinary infection, probably getting into the bloodstream, and their blood pressure was falling. Would you send that patient to the hospital, and would you give antibiotics? And about 80% of the doctors said no, they wouldn't. If they knew the patient, they knew the family situation, they would just allow the infection to be the final event as long as the individual wasn't suffering. On the other hand, they said if it was a painful kidney infection and that the antibiotic might be palliative to take care of the pain, then it was more than reasonable to use the antibiotic in that situation. So these are the tough situations. When do we let, as my mother says, when do we let go of these mortal ties that we have? You know, how do we say, okay, maybe it's my time? And it's easier to decide for ourselves than for somebody else.